This is the G podcast, where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. This is the G podcast, and today we got another special guest. We got Mike D from Mike D's BBQ in the building. We getting right to it, y'all.
No talk back. You see me blink yet?
Once again, y'all, one more time. This is the G podcast, where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. This is the G pod. Mike D, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yo, man. So, we're just going to dive right in here into the podcast. Before we get into just tell the people why, if you're in Durham and you want barbecue, what makes Mike D's BBQ like the reason why they need to go on the east side to go check that out over some other places around.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why they got to come check us out at Mike D's BBQ is there's only one Mike D, and that's me. So no other barbecue spot in Durham has me. But no, the sauces and rubs that we use are award-winning sauces and rubs that we've been selling across the world for the last 10 years. So the sauces and rubs have won multiple world championships, multiple best in state. So that's like the that we use. And then, we all have our own ways that we smoke, our own wood combinations. And so I just feel like my flavors with my wood, with my smoking technique sets us apart from everybody else.
Word up. We are going to dive in, learn a little bit more about those award-winning sauces. I've been to your establishment a few times, and I have to admit, very flavorful. If you're a barbecue fan, me personally, if I had to choose one thing, I gotta go with the ribs. I don't know. For me personally, I really think the ribs are my personal favorite from the spot. But I don't know if, in your opinion, do you think there's a fan favorite out there?
The fan favorite is definitely our brisket. We sell more brisket than we do anything else, and it didn't start that way. Like when we started out, we were selling a lot of pulled pork. We still sell a lot of pulled pork, but when the New York Times was in Durham and they did their 36 hours in Durham piece, they wrote about coming to us to get a brisket sandwich. And so since then, brisket is just nonstop.
Oh, wow. And do people come to get that brisket sandwich that they recommended from the article?
They do. The brisket sandwich is our best-selling sandwich.
Wow. So, I mean, let's just dive right in there. Like the impact of press when you own a restaurant, because the restaurant business is one of the more difficult businesses out there. And you said it wasn't always like that. So what, can we just talk about the impact that the good press, because you've been mentioned not just in the New York Times, but a couple other publications, especially locally, for like go-to new restaurants, different awards, what type of impact does that really have on a local business?
Those kind of things have a big impact on local business because people have so many options, right? There's so much food in Durham. Durham's becoming known as like a foodie town. So there's all these restaurants, these James Beard Award finalists or semifinalists or award
Shout out
winners.
to
So there's so
Saltbox.
many
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Chef Ricky. And so whenever you're able to get press that mentions you and like calls you out specifically, it brings people in, right? Because, especially as a small business, that's, this restaurant is a new expansion of our business, been around for a while, but there's still a lot of people that don't know we exist. So anytime you get this new press, whether it's in the news media or in like on TV or in print or online or something, it just introduces you to new people, and those new people come in and try, and it helps you grow who your regular customers are because people come in to eat, they're coming back.
Word. And so let's talk about the upbringing a little bit. The business, Mike D's BBQ, it's in Durham, North Carolina, but like where do you call home originally? What would you call home?
Well, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, but home, like my dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot.
Okay.
So I was born in California, lived in Germany, lived in like the DC area, and then moved to Richmond. And so then I was in Richmond probably the most time in my life outside of Durham was in Richmond. So that's kind of where I say I grew up at.
Okay. Being in the military, do you have any favorite spots that you were able to stay over others in that experience?
Probably our time in Northern Virginia was probably my favorite time. I mean, I have some fond memories of Germany, but I was really little when we lived in Germany, so I don't remember much of it. I remember some of the crazy stuff like electrocuting myself or, or like running away by myself and taking public transit across Nuremberg, Germany without my parents. So I remember those kind of things, but for the most part, like I don't remember much about some of the places that we lived. So the Northern Virginia area before he retired is probably what I remember the most and had the fondest memories of.
Word. And when you say electrocute yourself, how bad of an electrocution are we talking? Like all your hair stand up type gig, or like what we talk about when you say electrocute yourself?
Wow. So it was bad. So I was in my room and had a tall lamppost and there was no light bulb in it, and I was like acting like I was climbing it, and I stuck my hand in the socket,
Mm.
and the electricity went in. So I still have like scars, like it went in my finger. And normally it'll go in your finger, travel through your body, and find like an exit point. But for me, it went down to my feet, but then it came back up, and it came out like the palm of my hand. I have another scar right here,
What?
and so like it circulated my whole body. And I was like stuck to the thing. Like my mom came in there, was trying to pull me off, and it was like going through hers. And she finally let go and unplugged it, and that's when it stopped. Like all my fingers were like swollen at the top. Uh,
Oh, whoa. That's crazy. That is crazy. So hold up. So just in case you didn't know, if you got a lamp that's plugged up and a bulb is not in the little socket joint, is what you're saying. If you put your hands
yeah,
in there, you will feel the current. That's literally all that you did?
that's all I did. Was stick my hand where the light bulb was supposed to be at.
Oh my goodness. Yo, that sounds
Yeah.
crazy. And you said it traveled through your whole body. Like, like roughly how long of a period are we? This was like a quick 10 seconds that felt like a lifetime, or did all this happen like about how long were you actually locked in getting electrocuted? That's nuts.
Wait, I mean, I don't remember like the time because I was little, so I don't remember like how long. I know it felt like a long time. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but yeah, long enough for it to go through my finger, through my whole body, and then come back out the
Dang, so
palm of
you
my
really
hand.
low key like an X-Men, low key. Like, okay, word up. And so, all right, so grew up military background. Um, and then you came to Durham. So with that said, like where did you graduate high school? And like where were you staying when you graduated high school around that age?
I was in Richmond, Virginia still when I graduated high school. Yeah.
Okay. So when you graduate high school, what are you thinking at this time? Are you applying for colleges? Are you thinking like you're gonna go do military stuff? What are you thinking at that age, seeing how you grew up in the military and now it's like the next phase of life post high school?
Yeah, no, I was looking to go to college. I was not trying to go to the military. I was not built to make it through boot camp with people yelling at me for no reason. So I had a hard enough time with basketball coaches yelling at me in high school. I was like, I couldn't have like, sergeants in boot camp. So yeah, I was looking to go to college and not looking to go to the military.
Word. And did you end up going to any school after you graduated high school?
Yeah, so I went to a small college in the mountains of Virginia called Emory and Henry College. I went there for 3 years before I dropped out and went back home to Richmond for a while.
Okay.
Um, then resumed college much later in life.
Word. So out in the mountains of Virginia, the Appalachian Trail, like out there. I'm fond of the North Carolina mountains, so like I don't know. I'm assuming it's just a little bit up north that similar vibes
Yeah,
in terms of those lush green hills out there. But like, what was that experience like at the university?
I mean, it was a interesting experience for me, like coming from Richmond, Virginia, living in sort of the inner city of Richmond, Virginia, and then going out to these mountains where there was not a lot of people that looked like me out there.
Mm.
And so at that time, that college was, in my freshman class, there was, I want to say, 6 black folk,
Oh wow!
and so it wasn't a lot of us. It was an experience
Were they
trying
on the
to.
football and basketball team or? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe I was the only person of color that was not there for sports.
Word. Word. And you stayed for 3 years. So like let me ask, because that you said you left the school 3 years in. Why leave at that point, seeing how you're so seemingly so close 3 years in?
Just life was kind of rough for me at that point in time. I was ready to go back home, and then when I was back home over like that summer after junior year, people got in my ear and were like, you should come home and do this. So actually, when I dropped out, I went. This was like during the boom of the mortgage industry before, like the boom of the subprime market. So I was convinced by some folks, one of my old high school basketball coaches actually, to come back home and work in the mortgage business with them and make money instead of doing that. And so that's what I did for a little bit.
So this is like before. This is like what, early 2000s, roughly, or what we talking?
Yeah, this is early 2000s. So I dropped out in the summer of 2001. I would have graduated in 2002, but I had left in 2001. So yeah, this was early 2000s.
And what were you studying when you were there?
I was studying at the time. The major was called Public Policy and Community Service, so it was really about social justice advocacy and working in like the nonprofit world, fighting for equality and justice.
Okay, like what drew you to that sort of major?
Honestly, the initial reason why, because I thought it was going to be easy, right? So like, when I first went to school, I was a computer science major, and so. But all those classes were like at 8 a.m. And at that time in my life, I was not a morning person.
Yeah.
And I was not trying to get up for 8 a.m. classes all the other side of campus. And like coding I wasn't really into coding at that time. So that's what they were really focused on. And so I was looking to switch. And a friend of mine was like, hey, there's this public policy major that's like, you just sit in a circle and you talk. You should do that. And so I was like, oh, that's going to be easy. So I'll go and do that.
Was it as easy as you thought it was?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no, because it was really a class all the classes really about making you think, right? So it's making you sort of dig into why these inequalities exist in this world and try to get those root causes. So while there wasn't as much work as in some of the other classes, you had to do a lot of like introspective thinking and discussion with people. And what was made it more challenging was I was the only Black person in most of these classes. And so when they would be talking about some of these issues, they'd be talking about it from like a different perspective, and I'm trying to bring up like the Black perspective, and that was sometimes would cause some challenges in rural Virginia.
Yeah. So let me ask, because you said you grew up in the military. Which one of your parents were in the military?
My dad.
Your dad. Word. And you grew up in the military, and so like, I say this because I heard you say Black. But then when I hear your last name, it sounds Espanol. If I'm saying that the right way, my political correctness might not be right on point here, but I do want to ask, because are you Black and Hispanic, or are you a Black Hispanic? Like what is that exactly? Because the last name, the last name.
So I consider myself Afro-Hispanic. My dad is from the Dominican Republic.
Oh, word.
And then grew up in Puerto Rico before he came to America, joined the military. My mom is from Clarksville, Tennessee, and she's Black. And so she's a country Black girl. She grew up on tobacco farms in Clarksville, Tennessee. So for the longest time, I only identified as Black. My dad kind of didn't speak a lot of Spanish when we were growing up at home. He was trying to distance himself from his family for various reasons. And so I didn't really, it was later in life that I started to identify with like the full side of the family. But so I call myself, an Afro-Hispanic, but for most of my life, I didn't identify with the Hispanic part of me.
Word. And like being, so like having that diversity within the home, but then going around your mom's side of the family, did you ever feel like you were any different? Like because of that, like, could you tell, like, or did you feel like there were any differences? Did you have to deal with that growing up?
Not from family, no. Outside of family, sometimes we run into stuff. Sometimes I wasn't Black enough for Black folks who were around where we lived because I wasn't fully Black. But within family, no, it was never an issue.
Word. Like when those moments happen, just how did you personally like, come to process those incidents in ways that were or did you come to process it in ways that were healthy? Just how did you come to process it overall when those incidents sort of happened?
Most of the time I didn't process it. I was young. I just like ignored it and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And people who would raise those issues, like I just didn't put myself around them because it just wasn't worth that sort of hassle. But it kind of has followed me a lot through life, though, where people in our community would always accept me because they'd see my last name, like you ain't all the way black, or and so I kind of just sometimes I would just run with the joke. Other times I'd push back, and then oftentimes I just moved on from those people.
Yeah. It's because especially like in North Carolina, most black folks got these English names. You know what I'm saying? Johnson, Jackson, Jenkins. I go through a whole Jones. I give you all the J's, right? but like that's just something. But I think now in especially in today's time, when we talk about diaspora and inclusion, that's been a conversation in terms of what they call like Afro Latino or Afro Hispanic, whatever the background is. And a lot of folks who grow up here don't necessarily realize how many Africans, the majority of Africans, were taken to that part of the world versus here in the US. So have you ever visited the Dominican Republic, or have you ever, been down to that part of the world?
So I've never been to Dominican Republic. The last time I was in Puerto Rico, I was like 5 years old. That was before my dad and his family had fallen out. The last time I was there, it was a big hurricane and the roof blew off the house that we were at.
Oh, wow. Well, while you were there?
While we were
That's
there,
crazy.
we had to go to the house below us so we could be covered, and then shower in the rain for the next couple of days. So that was
Wow.
it. It's been a long time since I've been to that part of the world.
Word. Yo, that's crazy. That's crazy. So wow. Yo, that's you've been electrocuted, survived a hurricane. This man was made to make barbecue. This is what I'm telling y'all. This is what you don't understand. Like, how do you okay. So growing up and having this ability to go from different places, do the military, going to Richmond, having that experience within school, but then coming back in that time period where you said it was a boom, similar to what happened here recently with COVID, with the housing market. Like it was just a crazy boom. Clearly weren't making barbecue. So like, were you cooking in the crib growing up? I'm curious, like before you got to this point of being an adult, were you doing any sort of at-home cooking? Did you have any go-tos that the family was like, nah, Mike, get in there and make us some X, Y, or Z?
No, because my mom is a phenomenal cook. So
Mm.
growing up, I mostly just like watched her cook and then try to emulate what she did. Um, but when I first started cooking food, like when I was in high school, I had a job with one of our former city council members in Richmond who had a food truck. Back then, food trucks weren't what they are today, where there's one everywhere. They're all logoed up with branding and all that. We just had a basic white truck, and we set up at like auctions and some special events and did food. So that was my introduction to like cooking in the food service. And so he sold barbecue on that truck, but like not real barbecue. So even before I knew like all barbecue stuff, I'd be like, bro, I don't think you're making this right.
Mm.
And so like we'd have these discussions about it. One day he just got frustrated with me and was like, you know what? If I'm not making it right, you do it. And then I'm gonna set up the thing, I'm gonna leave, and you run the whole thing by yourself, and we'll see what happens. And by the time he came back at the end of that night, everybody was like, Mr. Jones, you need to let Mike D run this all the time.
Oh, wow.
And so
What was he
it
not
was like,
doing right from your perspective?
well, one of the things that he did that was I knew was wrong was like he would boil his ribs first to get them tender. And I was like, that can't be right. I don't know much, but I know that can't be right.
Why can't that be right?
Because if you're smoking your ribs and you're cooking them low and slow, they get tender. You don't need to boil them first. That's just like a way to
Man,
cheat.
them ribs with that sauce was a slapper. I ain't gonna lie to you. The ribs with that sauce, man. I can't believe it. Yo, that's the ribs with the sauce was slapping, man. I have to say. But okay, go. So you saying if you cooking them low and slow, you should need to boil them. Should you ever need to boil them if you cook them a different method? Is that why people do it?
People do it because they don't know how to use fire. That's why people do it. Like if you're not gonna take the time to learn to smoke or grill your ribs, that's why you boil them first and then cook them in the oven or something. But if you take the time to learn to do ribs right, you should never, ever, ever, ever boil ribs first.
100% over the flame, or not over the flame, but just 100% seasoned to smoker.
Fire and smoke. That's all you need.
Word. So, but like, how did you know this though? Because you're somewhat young at the time. Did you read about it? So is this even like pre-YouTube era at this time? Because was folks even on YouTube University at this time? Like, how did you know that hey dog, you shouldn't be boiling these ribs?
It felt wrong. Like the first time I saw him do it, I was like, this doesn't feel right. I didn't know any better. I mean, I found out recently why I was like that, but at that time, I didn't know. So I just it just felt wrong to me. And so, like I said, I recently, in the last year, learned sort of like why I know that without having known that. But at that time, I was just like, bro, this just doesn't feel right. This can't be the way this is supposed to be done.
And you say you recently learned in the last year. Like, what was that realization, or what did you learn?
So I went down in March of last year, so almost a year ago. I went down to Mississippi and met my biological grandfather for the first time.
Wow.
And while we were sitting around talking, I learned, because he asked me, because he's been a pitmaster most of his life, in addition to lots of other things that he's
This your
done.
mom's father?
Yes.
Word. Mississippi. Word up.
So he's like a living, like, there should be books written about him, from like all the political stuff he did in Mississippi back in the day.
Can we say his name?
But all that time, yeah, Robert Dean Gray.
Word.
He was the first black mayor of Shelby, Mississippi.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, but he's always doing like pitmaster stuff down there. And so we were sitting there, and one of his friends who runs a barbecue joint in like one of the little small black towns that's right near Shelby was like, "Who taught you how to barbecue, Mike?" And I was like, "Nobody. I just taught myself how to do this." And my grandfather was like, "Nah, it's in your blood. Like, our family has been pitmasters for a long time."
Oh, wow.
He's like, "I did it." He's like, "I learned how to do it from my father and my uncles. They learned how to do it from their fathers and their uncles. When I was a kid, I was running the pits for them overnight so they could work the fields and do what they needed to do. And then I'd have that pork ready from the morning." He was like, "It's in your blood. That's why you know how to do this without having somebody teach you. Like, this is our family history."
Wow.
And so then things started to make a little more sense to me. I was like, oh, so that's why when I was 16, I knew that boiling ribs was wrong.
Yeah. That's crazy. They say like stuff like that gets ingrained, but man, that's a dope story. So did you go to Shelby, Mississippi? Is this like Southern Mississippi, Middle Mississippi? Like where in Mississippi we talking? Because it sounds like somewhere I don't want to go. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Nah, it's in the bayou, Mississippi. It's not quite all the way down at the bottom. It's like in the middle of Mississippi. But it's the best people.
Word.
When I went there to visit, I almost didn't come back.
Word. What did you like about it so much?
Just like the people are just like genuinely nice. Like it felt different. It felt like I was at home. It felt like I was supposed to be there. I had made an interesting note when I was there, because here we see Confederate flags everywhere,
right?
And we all have these stereotypes about Mississippi. The whole time I was in Mississippi, I didn't see one Confederate flag like on the back of a pickup truck flying in somebody's yard. None of that. And I asked him. I was like, why aren't there Confederate flags around here? And he was like, the main reason is because there's so many black towns around here. We outnumber them. They don't want none of that. It's like they know if they act out, there's more of us than there is them around here. And so that was his perspective on it. But it was interesting. None of the white folks I dealt with when I was down there, like I felt any type of way about. They never said anything or did anything out the way, any of that stuff. And so it was interesting. And I sat in some of the towns that are like Mound Bayou, Mississippi, which is just outside of Shelby. It was like arguably one of the oldest Black only incorporated towns in the country.
Wow.
And I sat at, like, my grandfather, who's 80. He helps his friend run his gas station down there, and so I spent a good amount of time just sitting at the gas station with all these old Black men,
Yeah.
just talking. And they had to gossip about every single person who pulled up at the gas station. They had a story to tell me about that person.
Yeah.
And at the same time, tell me about the history of Mound Bayou. Like, it's a Black only town, but at one point it had its own public swimming pool, its own public library. They had their own bank and all that stuff.
Mm.
And then over time, all that stuff just went away as, like, the generations got older and the newer generations didn't care as much. Lost the bank, lost the swimming pool, lost the library, and now it's a really poor town. And a lot of the old heads sit around and talk about the good old days and talk about when they had all that stuff and they were doing all that, and sort of talk about how these young folks don't like doing that kind of stuff, don't care about fighting for those kind of things. And so it was good to sort of hear that from them, but it was also sad at the same time. Like, what happened to us when we stopped wanting to fight for those things?
Yeah, got too comfortable, man. Like those things, like it's a great point. But I got this. I think that they made, not when I say they, I think compared to then, the standard of living is higher compared to then. Because back then everybody didn't even have running water, electricity. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of things that today is like, what you mean you don't have a sink and a toilet? And, all these things that make life a bit more palatable. But, again, like just a generation ago, those things weren't an automatic. Everybody didn't have plumbing. Everybody didn't have electricity. But now today, that's a standard even for, wherever you stay. So that and I think it's by design. You feel what I'm saying? Like, I think it's by design, and make people but so comfortable to where it's like, they don't want any more than what they have right now. Perfect. And then boom, cap it at that. But okay, so I appreciate you sharing those details. Like, Mississippi, man, it does, like, just saying the name. Like, I get just certain feelings just saying the name. It's a place, but at the same time, it has so much history, and especially for Black Americans, a very rich population and history of folks in that area. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And so when you were working on that food truck and you started, I guess, getting into that, to that side of things, how old were you again at this time?
I was 16.
16. And when you had that experience on the food truck, did you stop working around food and restaurants at any point? Or was that always something that was like a constant as you finished high school and college before you got to the mortgage industry?
No, after that, I stopped. I didn't work in the food industry, like in the restaurant industry again after that until I started Mike D's Barbecue. But I always knew I wanted to get back to it, right? Like that, like I was happy doing that. Like I was happy running a food truck by myself, doing all that stuff. And I knew that at some point I'd get back to that in life. I didn't know when, but I knew at some point I had to get back to
Well,
it.
like what do you remember enjoying about running a food truck at that age?
Just everything, right? Like, because there'd be times where I would be taking the orders, turning around, fixing the food, and putting out the window, just running the whole thing by myself. And then, there'd be busy times where he was there helping still too. But like, just the way people get happy when they eat good food, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I need to do that. And like, that's when I started to develop, like, I liked feeding people, right? I liked to cook something and give it to somebody and they'd be like, that's good, right? And that's like, I needed to keep getting that feeling. So that's what I wanted to get back to, just like the idea of feeding people. That's when I really noticed that like food can bring people together, right?
Yeah.
Like food makes people stop all the other stuff and just talk about how good this is. Then you can relate to somebody, you can start having a conversation. And I knew that was the thing about food that I had to get back to one day.
Word. And so in the short term, are you starting to hone in on your skill set as a hobby, like around the crib, starting to get a little grill, charcoal here or there? Like, are you starting to dive in that respect, or are you not even really even picking it up as a hobby?
At that age, I wasn't even picking it up as a hobby. Like once I started working on the food truck, I didn't really like get back into it until I was like in my 20s. It was almost 10 years later that I started doing it again, and then it was like a hobby. Then I was like buying grills for the backyard and starting to do all that stuff.
Word. So tell me about your experience in the mortgage industry, because you're not there no more. Like, so what did you find success before everything crashed? Did you stop because everything crashed? Just what was that overall experience like for you?
Yeah, so I stopped before the crash because I had noticed how unethical the subprime market was, right? Like it was crazy the kind of loans that you could push through, the kind of money you can make as a mortgage loan officer or a mortgage broker, because you could really be people come to you think you got their best interest at heart, but you could really at that time, you know, add points onto the back, increase their interest rate a little bit, and you get money back from the mortgage company who you put the loan through as a way, because they're gonna make more money if you're padding that stuff on. And so like you could really do a deal and make like $14,000 on one deal, because like you could tack on so many points, which is really cost that customer more money long term. And so, but you could also like you could give people like 115% refi mortgages back then, right? So like
Mm,
50% over equity. Like it was crazy. And the people who I was working for were also like he was one of my old coaches, but he was also the pastor's son of the church that my family was going to. Like he was putting church members who were supposed to be like your people in some of these terrible mortgage.
mm,
He put my parents in one of these terrible adjustable rate mortgages. And so
mm.
I would have arguments with them about the ethicalness of what they were doing. Uh, and we ended up parting ways because it just didn't feel right to me that you could do that kind of thing.
Yeah, it clearly was. It clearly wasn't. Like when the dust settled, like that was definitely led to the whole crash in 2008, 2009. So when you left, what did you leave to? What you left that industry, and what was next for you?
Yeah, so when I left that industry, I actually didn't really do much. I was kind of like searching what I was going to do next, right? I didn't want to go back to school. I was trying to find work. And so I kind of went back to like what I was studying before I dropped out. And my next real job after that was working for Acorn when it existed, doing community organizing work and doing policy work.
Mm, word. And you were able to, and you still didn't finish school at this time, correct?
Correct. At this time, I still didn't finish yet.
And but yet you went and pursued an opportunity that aligned with what you were trying to study when you were actually in school.
Right, right. That's what I did.
What is it about that type of work that interests you?
It just really trying to like find ways to give a voice and power to people who don't have them, right? So trying to work with neighborhoods that are usually not invested in, usually are overlooked and over policed, trying to help them sort of fight for as tax-paying citizens, they deserve the same kind of treatment everybody else did, right? So trying to organize those neighborhoods, trying to work with those people to fight for policies that help them, work with them to fight against banks for banking policies that could actually benefit them and not hurt them. And so like that's what drew me to that work, was trying to do right by people who were constantly being taken advantage of or just overlooked.
Word. So it's like the pendulum definitely swung from like a predatory industry to something where it's really not about trying to prey on people or take advantage of people. It's the complete opposite.
Right, absolutely. I was trying to like get back to what I knew I was supposed to be doing and not putting people in bad mortgages, but trying to help people instead.
Word. And is this still in the Richmond area at the time?
Oh no, so when I was doing so I didn't do this. I was hired to do it in Richmond, but I never actually made it back to Richmond. So when they hired me, they sent me off to Kansas City to do training. And then from Kansas City, they sent me to Raleigh. And I was in Raleigh for a little bit. And then me and the company had a little bit of a disagreement on some stuff. I ended up leaving there and going to live in South Carolina for a little bit. And then came back up to Durham when at the time my fiance got moved to open up an office in Durham. And that's when we came up here doing that kind of work. And that's what I did for like the next 10, 11 years.
Okay. Like where in South Carolina?
So I lived in Columbia, South Carolina.
Word. And you said like fiance at the time. Are we divorced? Did you ever get married?
Yeah, we are still married.
Oh, okay. Word. Hey, shout out. I don't want to make assumptions. You know what I'm saying? So how long have you been married?
It'll be 16 years in October.
Oh man, we got a round of applause. 16. I like that. I'm 10 years in. So talking to somebody 16 years in is not that common, is what I'll say. This is not that common. So when did you meet your wife?
We met in Kansas City. We were both hired by the same place to do that kind of work. And so we met in Kansas City when we were there for training.
Word up, which is another barbecue hub in the United States, Kansas City. So it's something about so you meet your wife at training in one of the barbecue capitals of the United States, is what you're telling me.
That is right. That is right.
Okay. and this is the training for the nonprofit work.
Right.
And so, okay, so let me just ask, because I didn't take that long to go from like meeting to engagement to marriage. How long did it take you to go from meeting this person in Kansas City to saying, I see a wife here?
So we met in Kansas City in like March of that year, and we got engaged in December.
Word up. So tell me why you knew or why you moved at that rate, because some might say that's a fast pace. Why or what was it for you that gave you the confidence to say this is how I'm moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, when you meet somebody and you connect, like you just know, right? And so we had the same interest in working to fight for justice for our community. We had some things in common, and so once we connected in that way, right, you kind of just know. And so I proposed when we moved to Durham. Like we had moved to Durham in December of 2007. And that Christmas is when I proposed. So like I kind of, as we were going through that, like I knew, and so that's how I kind of moved. What as some people say, quickly, and I was a lot quicker for some because I was 23 at the time. So you know, I hadn't even really experienced life yet. So
yeah, like I mean, I got married at 26ish. Not that far off. It was mid-20s for sure. I was 26ish. And I wouldn't say recommend everybody do it the way that I did it, right? But like what do you think some of the pros are of making that decision to do it, say at that age, versus where some might say, man, that's too early? Like what do you in retrospect identify as some of like the pros of making that decision when you did?
And coming up, the pros are really that you get to build together, right? So you're both like figuring things out at that point. So you're really doing a lot of building together. There's also an advantage, like if you have kids at that time, right? When your kids are older, like you're still pretty young in life, and you can start there and enjoy life instead of being 60 when your kids are grown, right? You can be, I'm about to be 40, and my oldest is in college, right? So like, it allows you to still be able to enjoy life later on. But it's really about, being able to build together, I think is the biggest pro of doing it that early.
Word up. So like moving to Durham in 2007, this is in the midst of the sales of the ship turning, like in the city. This is in the midst of when that's happening, if I have to say, because at 2007, at this point, South Point has been here for a little bit of time, and you are starting to hear of potential places that you can actually go downtown. This is around that time period where downtown Durham is starting to shift from don't ever go there unless you're going to the post office to there are some things that we can do downtown. Is that a fair way to kind of put it around the time you arrive?
Yeah, because when we first got here, we had some people telling us never go downtown. We had some people telling us, "Hey, no, there's a couple of spots you can go to." So like we were like, "Well, what is it?" Because half of y'all are telling us don't go downtown, and half of y'all are telling us it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that sounds about right for that time period in Durham.
And like roughly what part of Durham did you move to at first when you got here? Like what part of town was home for you?
So we lived in southeast Durham, kind of off of like Miami Boulevard, Mineral Springs. We still live over on this side of town. We've actually lived in this side of town the whole time we've been here. We've moved different neighborhoods. We've always been on this side of town, and so that's where home has been. But we've had offices downtown that we worked in when we first moved here. My wife was organizing in East Durham, so that was kind of our introduction to East Durham.
Mm,
And while we've always had a connection to that neighborhood, she was holding like her first community organizing meetings in the church right there at the corner of Driver and Angier.
mm.
Uh, and so we've always been connected to that neighborhood. We've always lived not too far from it as well. But the southeast Durham area has kind of been where we have always lived, and just watched it boom into this sort of crazy part of town now with like suburban neighborhoods popping up every day now.
Yeah, it's almost like Southeast DC to some degree. Like, because my like just to give people like a maybe a more familiar comparison when it comes to the gentrification in Durham, that east part of town was the last part to get touched. Like they kind of went all over and waited before they started like pushing further that way. Um and so that was like your initial experience on that side of town. So upon arriving here, obviously you've made it home and you made a business here, but just like what were your initial impressions when you and your partner at the time touched down?
We love Durham, right? Like Durham, when we got here, there was just like this eclectic group of people here, right? Like it was kind of a progressive, like city. There's a lot of people who are fighting for social justice. A lot of that kind of stuff was here, and so we love the vibe here, right? There was a lot of this. There seemed even at the time to be kind of a focus on trying to support local, and so there was always like people were proud to be from Durham,
Mhm.
uh, and so I think that's always kind of what's kept helped us keep us here was just sort of like the way Durham people love Durham, and so we've always kind of just like been attracted to that. And I've always been attracted to like East Durham, the way East Durham is. Like East Durham, I was walking through East Durham today, and I was talking to my friend who owns Refuel Coffee Shop at the corner, and I was like, East Durham is such an eclectic place, right? There's so many different types of people who live here and walk here and do all this stuff here. Like, how can you just not love being over here? I mean, like, from the person who sits at the people who sit at the corner near Sophia's, like burning crates all night, to the people who live there and like walk their dogs, to the families who lived there for a long time, right? There's something about East Durham that kind of always has embodied why I like Durham so much, and it's really just kind of the way people are in East Durham.
Yeah, it's also some other things about East Durham that embodies what makes Durham Durham. I love the way you just framed that, by the way. Like we gonna clip that, make that's good for the socials. But let's be honest too. There's some other elements about East Durham that also make Durham give it the sort of reputation that it's known to have in terms of that urban edge in the triangle. Say that's maybe unique to Durham that we don't associate as much with maybe Raleigh or Chapel Hill.
Yeah. That stuff happens too. Like I've been robbed over there. Other food trucks have been robbed. We've had a car drive through the front of a Refuel coffee shop after they were chasing each other, shooting at each other. So, things still happen.
Things
Uh,
still happen on the east side. Yes,
yeah.
indeed. Yes,
And
indeed.
we were talking the other day at the bar the other night in East Durham. We were just like, there's always something happening in East Durham. Like something is always going on.
No question. No question. And so your business is located in this area of East Durham that I think has been in the like revitalization talk, right? Like between where you are down to like Ponysaurus and like all that stuff going on the east, like that stretch of the east part, like it's you can tell that there's been an intent to try and inject more local businesses, just do some different things, you know, and gentrification often gets looked at a certain way because people who are native to the area, from the area, are ultimately pushed out because they can no longer afford to be in these places, right? And I know we kind of jumping around, but just from your point of view, like, because I've my wife is in real estate, so I'm aware of what real estate costs from a commercial and a residential perspective. And I know why that area is attractive for small business on it. It makes sense. I get why that area makes a lot of sense. But it also has unique challenges that some other areas don't have, that have a higher price tag. So I'm just curious from your point of view, like having been there towards the early stages in 2007 to where we are today, like what's your personal just view on what we call gentrification, revitalization, whatever word we want to put on it? Like, what's your personal view on how that's had an impact on East Durham specifically?
Yeah, so it's good and bad, I would say, right? Like just as you described, right? The bad is that there's a lot of people who've been pushed out. The good is that there has been opportunities that are created that help small businesses, particularly Black-owned businesses, to afford to have a brick and mortar location. And that's only possible because some of the property owners over there are invested in making sure that we continue to have a hold over there and don't just allow gentrification to come and whitewash all of East Durham and old East Durham. And so like when I first opened my retail store on Driver Street in 2020, you know, during the pandemic, I noticed one day, and I was looking at one of the properties over there, like it had been a while since I had like hung out in East Durham during the day. And there was like white women jogging down the street. And my contractor looked at me and was like, "We are in East Durham, right?" I was like, "We are, but it's definitely different." And so, but yet some of like where I put my retail store at the time, there wasn't that much open. There was a gym next door to me that was kind of closed because of COVID. You know, Russell's Pharmacy was open over there. You know, Sam had his barbershop over there, but there wasn't much else that was over there open. Sophia's Pizza was open at the time, but there wasn't much else that was open. A lot of the commercial buildings there had been sitting vacant for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though Driver Street and Angier are like major corridors into the city, into 147, people just automatically assume that nothing was ever happening there because all these buildings are abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I opened up the retail store there, people were like, "Well, why are you putting a store here? There's nothing here." And I was like,
No
"It's
foot
coming,
traffic.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah." They're like, I was like, "It's coming. Like there's a vibe here. It's coming. At some point, this is the last gateway into downtown that hasn't been touched yet, right? So at some point, people are going to start trying to put stuff here. And if we are invested in trying to make sure we're on the ground floor of that, like we can benefit from the gentrification revitalization that happens around here."
I got to give you a round of applause on that, because East Durham is, like you said, it has its challenges, and you were ahead of this, say, in 2020. So let me take a step back then, because these award-winning sauces. So before Mike D's was a restaurant, it was a retail space, right? So, and you had the award-winning sauces before the restaurant was even a thing. So what year? So it's okay, like to get an award for a sauce, and that was before 2020 as well, right? Like what year did you win the first award for one of your sauces?
So the very first time I won an award for sauce was even before I started the business. It was back in 2009. I had entered into like an amateur sauce making competition in Raleigh, and an early version of what's our spicy sauce ended up finishing second in our division and third overall for all the sauces. And that was the first time a sauce I had made had like won something. But once I launched the business in December of 2013, started selling products in 2014. And our first like major award happened in 2016 when we won Sauce Boss down in Kinston at the Barbecue Festival on the News, which is one of the biggest whole hog barbecue competitions in the country, really, but especially in North Carolina. And then from there, they started just happening. Like we won Sauce Boss there a couple years in a row. In 2017, we started winning like world championships. Like our very first world championship happened in 2017. And then it just kind of kept rolling after that to where two of our products have each won 4 world championships. So it's kind of like you send them off to these competitions and let the judges decide like where we fall. But we were racking up those awards, from the early on in the business.
And so like because like Black folks will quote unquote make sauce, and it'll be some sauce that's already got a label on it that says barbecue sauce, and they didn't added their own little bit of this, and added their own little bit of extra honey, and they be like, "This is my special sauce." Like when we say you got your own sauce here, like just like, what are we talking about exactly when we talk about making your own barbecue? Like what makes a barbecue sauce versus ketchup versus steak sauce? Like what makes barbecue sauce barbecue sauce?
Yeah, it's really just the way you combine the ingredients, right? So, steak sauce doesn't have the same flavors as barbecue sauce. It doesn't have the vinegar and tomato in the same way. Barbecue sauce is really something that just to complement meat that has been slow cooked, right? People use barbecue sauce for lots of things, but you really want it to be something that's going to complement the flavors of the meat that you're slow cooking and complement the seasoning that you use on those meats. So when I say I have my own sauce, I really started just like developing a recipe from scratch and trying to figure out, I didn't see kind of what I wanted to see on the market, right? So I'm in North Carolina at this point in life, and it's either like this full vinegar sauce from the eastern part of the state, the western part of the state's got that tomato-based sauce from the influence of Tennessee, and then you have like the Lexington region, which has sort of like a hybrid, but like I was trying to find sort of like the right balance, what I felt was the right balance of vinegar and tomato in a sauce. And so I was like, I don't see it on the market, so let me just try to experiment and make something. So I just started like playing around with recipes, trying to craft and like tweak things to get the right tang, the right smoky flavor that I wanted in there. And it took several years of like throwing these big cookouts and testing out all these different sauces on people before I finally found the ones that I wanted to move forward with. And so it's a lot of process to develop your own sauce in that way.
Yeah. So like, what made you even think, yo, I'm gonna throw this sauce in a competition? Or was that the goal from the start? Because it's one thing to just be having a hobby, chefing up, but then it'd be like, yo, I'm putting my competition. Like, what was the thought behind that?
Yeah, so I want to see if it was any good, right? It's one thing when all your friends tell you it's good, right? It's one thing when all the people you have over to your house and you're feeding them tell you it's good, because like more than likely, if they're at your house eating, I can tell you it's nasty. They'll just wait till they're gone and talk about you behind your back. But nobody's going to tell it to you, right? So I was like, I want to know if this sauce is actually good. Like at that time, I had no intent of like turning into a business. I was just trying to make a sauce that I wanted to have for myself. But I wanted to see if it was any good outside. Like, I wanted to see if people who didn't know me, who were outside of my circle, thought it was any good. And so when I took it to that competition, right, it was like sort of the test to see like, was there something to the sauce?
And so the competition, you're not selling the sauce yet. You're not packaging in it yet. You're just like, that's kind of like your first real measuring stick to say like, oh, I got something. You win that first award, or not even win, but you placed third in that first competition, you said in 2009. Is that the motivation to say, you know what? Let me get this thing right and keep at it? But like, when did it turn into like, I'm offering this sauce to my friends in bottles or containers? Like, when did it go from competition 2009 to I got something in a bottle or container?
Yeah, it took years to get to that point. I mean, I kept perfecting the sauce just because I wanted to have a sauce that I had at the house, not even to give away, just to
gotta have own sauce at the crib.
Yeah, like that's what it was really about. And so when people come to my house, they'd be like, "Yo, y'all got to get an invite to Mike D's cookout because he got that sauce." Like that was the whole thing behind
Word.
it. And it wasn't until like people kept saying you should start a business, right? Like and sell this sauce. People tell me at the cookouts. I had a barbecue blog where I would review restaurants as I traveled around for work. that kind of grew into like sauce companies from around the country sending me bottles of sauce to review on my blog.
Mm.
And I was like, some of these sauces are not good at all, but somehow they're like professionally bottled and they're selling them. So somebody's buying them. And I was like, mine is better than that. And I was like, so maybe I should consider it. But I still was like, I do policy work for nonprofits, right?
Right.
I'm not a business person. I just do this as a way to like decompress after a long week of work. But I still would remember, like back when I was 16, I kept saying I got to get back into the food world somehow. But I kept like having an excuse all the time for it. And the shift happened between 2011 and 2012 when we had a son who died at 6 months of age. And so,
Sorry to hear that.
like, so seeing kind of like how he kind of fought for those 6 months that he was alive, and all but 2 weeks of that he lived in the hospital. So like, kind of just like seeing like this dude he can't talk, he can just try to live, right? And for him to be able to do that until he couldn't do it anymore, like I felt like I had to try to find a way to sort of like honor him. And part of my way of honoring Aaron's memory is like, if he could make excuses for trying to live, then I can't make excuses for like not chasing after my dreams and passions. And so that's when he died in 2012, and it took me until the end of 2013 to officially launch the business. But like, that's when the shift happened as a way to just honor my son. That was really the thing that sort of shifted from just being like this hobby and a way to decompress to trying to make it into a business.
Wow, man. Again, my condolences and sorry to hear that. That is a powerful story in my opinion. Because these tragedies, for lack of better words, happen to everybody. And what you've been able to do with that is definitely, remarkable, man. So that's unfortunate to hear, but it's also something to highlight in terms of just the reality of how one thing just takes you into a completely different realm you weren't anticipating. And so going into the sauces, like, that's a long period before getting a retail space in 2020. So couple of questions, because you've got a wife, you've got a partner. What is your partner saying when you're starting to put more investment in these sauces, and it's starting to clearly take more and more of your time? Like, what is your partner saying from that perspective as this stuff is starting to grow?
I mean, she wasn't. To be honest, everybody wants to like have the story about how their partner was like extra supportive right from the very beginning. It caused tension with us because it's like you're putting a lot of effort and resources and investment to this thing. There's so many sauce companies, a lot of them fail. Like, why are you doing this? Right? We could be focusing on these other things, but you're doing this. So it caused some tension with us initially. But she was also like, I'm not going to stop you from chasing your dreams. So we'll just, and I get it. You're also trying to honor our son's memories. So, I'm gonna support it. But like, it did cause some tensions as we were trying to sort of force that going forward.
I mean, naturally so. As when you're married and like you say, you're figuring stuff out together, that's a part of the balancing game. Is we're still growing into like who we're going to be as adults. And it's like, when we was in our 20s, we both was this way, and now we're in this phase, and it's like, how do we keep the balance, the support, even though I'm not exactly who I was and you weren't exactly who you were? It's like still trying to find ways to be there and support one another. Like, I think it's dope that your partner had within themselves to question, but also give you the space and the room to say, I'm not going to stop you from doing X, Y, or Z. Because it's one thing to say, like you said, maybe the stereotypical story of support, but then also too, like, giving people the space and room to grow and figure things out along the way, I think is the most you can really ask for in a partnership, is just give your partner the space to find themselves within a dynamic. And I think that's a great thing to hear personally.
Yeah, that's true.
And so going from a consistent sort of job where you're getting a check on this versus an entrepreneur gig where you're making your product, you're selling your product, like it's a full gig. Like, what made you want to get a retail store in that time span because what made you want to get a retail store based off your experiences of crafting these sauces and winning these competitions?
Right. So it took a path to get there. I knew I kind of always wanted to have a supply, like a barbecue supply store, as part of the business, but it took, like, the pandemic is really what forced that. So when I first started selling the sauces, I had a website. We did a little bit of online stuff, but it was mostly word of mouth. Like, I'd always keep some in the trunk of the car. And if I'm in the grocery store and I see somebody in the aisle, on the sauce aisle, I'd be like, "Hey, I got this sauce you should try."
Word. Like, hold on, hold on,
Which
hold on.
was
Which grocery stores were you in? Like, did you have like go-tos where you was like, yeah, I'm gonna be at this spot and this spot? Like, where were you actually out here flipping the sauce out the trunk?
so no, I didn't have like a consistent store. Just like if I'd be out grocery shopping, there's a food line not that far from my house, so I'd be at the food line with my shopping cart, and I'd see somebody on the aisle. And this is hard for me because I'm an introvert. I don't really like just approach people and start talking. But I'd see somebody looking at sauce, and I'd be like, "Oh, you're trying to figure out what sauce to buy?" Because here, the sauce aisle, there's so many
Right.
choices. So I'd be like, "You're looking for a sauce? Like, what you looking for?" And they'd be talking. I'd be like, "I got the sauce you should try, but you got to come out to my car."
Yo, you sound like a straight East Durham drug dealer, man. What are we talking about right now?
And
Like a
like the
sauce?
first time
Like,
it
is it
worked,
gas or like is it
right?
loud? What kind of sauce? What kind of sauce we talking?
Yeah, the first time it worked, I was in complete shock. Like the first time somebody left the store and followed me out to my car and got a little sample and then bought a bottle, I was like, "Oh, I think I can do this." Like I just convinced somebody to leave the grocery store to come to the trunk of my car and try this sauce and then buy a
Yeah.
bottle. I was like, "I think I could probably figure this out." But so we did that for a while, and then we started doing like farmers market and like small markets here and there, and then that we started to get a little more popular. So we started to grow and started doing like big festivals. Then we started traveling between here and DC, just doing events, selling direct to the public. And then 2020 and the pandemic hit and everything shut down. So all these events that were the bulk of our revenue were gone. And we had to try to
Mm.
figure out a way to keep doing this, right? So we ramped up online sales and ended up doing like a word of mouth campaign to get people to help us get a customer in all 50 states. And then our local customers like, "Look, we've been used to following you to these events and buying from you. We don't want to pay for shipping when we're right here in the triangle with you." And so that's when I started trying to find a place I could open up, even though it was still in the pandemic, where these local folks could just come to me and buy without having to pay for shipping. And that was kind of the driving force for getting the retail store opened. And I had wanted to do it. I had always wanted to put something in East Durham. When I was trying to find this retail shop, I was looking at spaces everywhere, including downtown, but the rent was just like crazy downtown.
Yeah.
And so I happened to be driving on Driver Street one day and I saw the for lease sign in the window. And I was like, "Let me pull over and get this number because this is a small retail spot in East Durham where I could try to put this retail store." And that was kind of the driving force for getting that thing going.
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned toward the beginning that there are certain I can't remember exact words you used, but I believe it was property owners or just owners of whatever who want to give certain opportunities to people in East Durham to ensure that it keeps a certain flavor, a certain aesthetic. Um, do you feel like you're working with one of those types of people in terms of like how you were able to get this opportunity to set up? Because like a random, I got to admit, if I own that spot and somebody come to me and be like, "Yo, I got some sauce. We gonna put it in the windows. Everybody's gonna love it." Like, I'm gonna be like, what else we got on the market here? Like, how was that? Because was there anything else that you were selling outside of the sauce? Because you said barbecue supply. Like, was it just the sauce or was it supply sauce? And were you selling like grills and smokers? Like, what did that original retail concept look like?
Yeah, so The building that I rented for the first store was through Self Help Credit Union. They have some investment. They're trying to support local communities. There was a local town like East Durham council that was kind of helping decide what businesses went in there, and so that kind of helped us get that spot. But there were kind of two selling points for us in getting the spot. One was it wasn't just going to be selling sauces and rubs, right? So we sold our sauces and rubs. We also sold like grill tools and accessories. I worked with a local builder to develop like smokers and grills that we would sell. So like I have my own line of smokers. And then he had grills that he was already making. So we were selling those, charcoal, wood, pellets for people like pellet smokers. And at the time, I was on the board of the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. So we started selling like other food products that are produced and made in North Carolina as well. So it wasn't just sauce in there. There was a lot of other things in there. And so that was one thing. And the other thing that kind of helped get the store was we had filmed a TV show in 2019 that had aired in 2020. So we were getting some name recognition as well. So that kind of helped them be willing to get us into that spot. And so that's how we got that. But the place we are now for the restaurant, like these are some private owners who are really invested in trying to help make sure, the right kind of folks or the right people who don't get these opportunities are in that space.
So was the retail shop not the same location as the current restaurant? It was a different location?
Yeah, it was a different location. It was down Driver Street. It was between Angier and Ash. So there used to be a mosque right there. We were right next door to where that mosque was.
Okay, word up. And so, okay, so got it. All right, so it's a couple of things here because like to go from your own sauces to your own line of smokers is kind of crazy. Like when you say own line, like what is a smoker? Just for people listening out here, like what makes a grill versus a smoker? Just for the basics out here.
Yeah, so it's really just like indirect heat versus direct heat, right? So a grill, your heat source is directly under what you're cooking, right? So like you have your coals and your wood, and then your the racks with the meat or whatever you're cooking right on top of that. That's a grill. You're cooking at a much higher temperature because it's direct heat. A smoker is, you can have some direct heat smokers, but there's usually something to like diffuse the heat, so it's not directly hitting it. It's kind of wrapping around it. But for the most part, smokers is offset, right? So your heat source is off to the side, and then you use like vents to sort of control the airflow to put the heat and smoke come from that fire chamber over across the meat as it leaves a smokestack. And so that's really the main difference between a grill and a smoker.
And you telling me that if you go to Mike D's, is Mike D's barbecue cooked in a Mike D's smoker?
Yeah, so the smoker we have at the restaurant now, like I designed it and then my guy built it for me. And so we're using that. And then the line of smokers that we sell is something that I also designed and then he builds it for me. People can order them on the website. But he has some smokers that he designed and grills that he designed that I sell that he has. But then we also have like the one smoker that I designed that we sell.
Oh, wow. And that's it's not like a little grill. Like that's you need a backyard for that joint. Like you can't just have that joint in the back of the party. Like you need a proper placement for something like that, right?
Yeah, it's big and it's heavy, so you need some space.
Word. So okay, so your experience. So like you mentioned the TV show. Like what was the TV show and how did you get that opportunity?
Yeah, so the TV show was a show called I Quit. And it basically featured 6 businesses from across the country, and it sort of followed us for a year as we quit our jobs and focused full time on our entrepreneurial journey. And so, like, I quit my job on camera to do this, and I got the show because somebody who worked at the Department of Agriculture, like, sent me a link and said, "Hey, I think you should apply for this because this is a show that's looking for people who work full-time and run their businesses full-time who are looking to leave their business, their job, just to focus on their business." And I had been talking to people for a while that at some point it was time for me to leave the nonprofit world and focus on barbecue. Because when I first started the business, I was working full-time, growing my family, going to grad school, and building the business at the same time. And so it was a lot. And so at some point, it's like, I need to just focus on the business. And so that's how the opportunity came about, really. So I applied, didn't think anything of it. So like that started back in 2018 when I first submitted my application for the TV show. And it took all of 2018 for them to decide to use us. And then they told us in January of 2019 that we were chosen for the show. And then we filmed all of 2019 for it to air in 2020.
Right before COVID hit.
Yeah.
Word. And so you actually did go back to school and finish?
Yeah. So while I was working in the nonprofit world, I did go back to school, finished my undergrad, and got my bachelor's in public administration. And then I went to grad school at Georgetown and got my master's in real estate with a concentration in development. So yeah, I did go back to school and finish.
And you went and pursued a master's in real estate.
Yeah.
Word up. So like how did we go from nonprofit to pursuing a master's in real estate? Because that's like, I think that's dope. But like, just how did that? Because you leave junior year, say school, then go back, finish, and then you go get a whole master's too. It's just like that's not typically the average journey.
Right. So one of the things I worked on when I was in nonprofit work was affordable housing and affordable housing policy. And one of the nonprofits I worked at was starting to get into affordable housing development. And so there's a lot of like community development corporations or CDCs that exist that try to develop and build affordable housing. And at the time, I had wanted to like start one of those and really get into building affordable housing. And my boss at the time said, look, most people who do this do it from a nonprofit perspective, but the most successful CDCs are the ones that do it from a for-profit mentality because they can build sustainability, which allows them to do more. So he was like, at the time, there was really two major programs that you could do. There was really one major program if you wanted to go and do a CDC, and that was at Penn State. They had a master's in community economic development. But what he told me was, you could do that and you'll be like all these other ones. But if you really want to do this and stick out, you'll go learn real estate development from a for-profit perspective because it'll help you build a better CDC. And so that's why I applied to the Georgetown program in their real estate program, so I could learn it from that perspective and then be able to come back and apply it in a way that would help affordable housing. But then I got the barbecue business took off, and so I started doing that instead.
Yeah, work. So like, I'm curious, like, are you able to couple that? Like, because do you think you would want to own your location potentially one day that you do brick and mortar, or like do you think that will have an impact on how you continue to run your business?
Yeah, so I do want to own my spot one day, and so I will. So yeah, but I always, at some point I'll get into real estate development and stuff like that too. Once I sort of stabilize these businesses in a way, it's something I know I can always go back to. But there's things you learn when you're learning real estate development from like the financial worksheets and all that stuff that really can be applied to any business you're in, right? Like you really learn financial modeling, which is really important for any business you're in, is how to like model your financials and project and do all that stuff. And so there's a lot of lessons from the real estate master's program that are applied in the business, especially now that we have the restaurant, because it's even more complex than just selling sauces and rubs. And so there's a lot of those things that still transfer over. But that kind of knowledge and education helped me in getting our current location, right? Because it helped me to be able to negotiate with the people who own this property that I'm in now, and we're developing it, right? That kind of knowledge sort of helped me in those negotiations and helped me along with that, right? So there's still ways that impacts what I'm doing now and will impact what I'm doing in the future.
Yeah, no question. And so you go from having a retail spot, like I gotta be honest, like I've talked to some other folks on the pod who've owned restaurants, and I've heard a couple of things. I've heard well, one, I know the restaurant business is not the easiest. The profit margins aren't typically the highest. And just the cost of food in itself, given, say, what it's done over the last 3-4 years, if you had the same business in the same location, but what you pay for food today versus what you paid 2 years ago is killing what was already slim profit margins, right? So I guess my question is, like, how do you go from having a retail shop more so focused on wholesale products to saying, you know what, I want a restaurant where I'm going to cook my own food, serve my own food, and do that multiple days a week?
East Durham is why,
Mm.
right? Because people would come into the shop and be like, "Oh, I thought I could get a barbecue sandwich in here. I just want a barbecue sandwich." Or they'd come in and be like, "You ain't selling no racks of ribs?" Like, "I just want a rack of ribs." And it says barbecue on the window, right? And so every day, people
Those
coming
out of
in
towners,
buying.
thinking that barbecue means ribs, they don't even understand.
And so, like, people were coming in, and like the people who live in East Durham were coming in. They were big supporters of us coming to get their snacks for the weekend, their sauce for the cookouts. But they were coming and saying, "Mike, we want food.
Mm.
Like, we know you can cook. Like, don't just sell us sauce. Like, sell us food. Like, when you can open that restaurant." And so, like, it was them who were really pushing me to like have a restaurant. They're like, "We need a barbecue spot in East Durham. We don't want to have to drive everywhere else in Durham to get barbecue.
Mm.
Like, we need one in East Durham." And so when I made this, like, I didn't publicize that when I was closing the store, that one of the things that was going to be in the works was a restaurant. But like, as I was closing, like that last day we were open, all our locals who always would walk by and come in, were walking in saying, "Oh, does this mean you're opening a restaurant now?" And so it was really a lot of the people who live in East Durham that were kind of like pushing us to go the restaurant route. And I knew I always wanted to do it like once my kids got older, because I know how much time it takes to do a restaurant. And so, like, you know, you need your kids to be much older so that way they're not as dependent on dad, because you're not going to be around a lot. And so it was the timing was right, and an opportunity presented itself to us that we couldn't pass up.
Word. And so was that always the plan though? Like when you had the retail spot, were you eventually thinking you would have a restaurant, or was it because of the experience and having people come into the building and those requests that you said light bulb?
Well, I always knew I was going to have a restaurant eventually. Like, that was always part of my plan, was to build sauces first, have a retail store, get into a restaurant. Like, most places start a restaurant first, and then they start selling sauce and they go the other way.
Right.
I always want to do the opposite. I want to build the brand on sauces and rubs, have a retail store, and then do a restaurant. So I always wanted to do it, and then people coming in and saying we want food kind of just helped speed that process up a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's dope to be, from a supply chain standpoint, to own as much as possible, right? So, obviously from a barbecue perspective, when you have something that you can make and sell like that along to complement the other food, like it's what else can we say, right? Like it's like you said, most will start with food and then venture out into creating products, but you actually had a standalone product, and then you've managed to shift into the restaurant business. And so, like, can you get that sauce outside of your restaurant today, or do people have to come to you to get the sauce?
Yeah, no, they don't have to come to us. I mean, if they come to us right now, we're sold out, so we don't even have any to sell to the public. We just have what I make every day for use in the restaurant. But when it's in stock, you can get it other places. We have retail partners in 27
Mm.
states, in Canada right now. And then there are some local places, like we have like Happy Dirt, which is in East Durham, is a distributor for us. They distribute to like other stores within Durham. Will carry our sauce as well.
Word. You said it's out of stock, but like, how does that typically work? If you were looking for Mike D's sauce and you were in Durham, obviously we got the East Durham location where until he changed it, he got the cups where you could pour your own sauce in there and pour it as much as I'm just saying, until he changed it, you go pour your own cups of sauce in there to go, so you can leave with some sauce. That's all I'm saying. But in the short term, if they weren't at the restaurant, how could people, or like what's the the calendar or the schedule so that people can maybe expect to try and get some of these sauces at some of these other locations?
Yeah, so like right now you can go to like Durham Co-op. They have some of our sauce. I'm blanking on the name at the moment. There's another local store that just kind of opened as a small bodega, and they have some of our stuff. And so those are like the places you can get it right now in Durham. For us, we hope to have them back in stock in about 6 weeks or so. So we use a production partner to produce the sauce for us, that we sell to consumers. And so we hope to have those back in stock at the restaurant and on the website in about 6 weeks or so.
Okay, word up. And like that, like that's the thing about owning a restaurant, man. Like especially something like barbecue. There's a lot of people who take pride in their quote unquote grilling abilities, smoking abilities, barbecue abilities, and making something like food. Like you said, it has the ability to bring so much joy and be a bridge, but then it has the ability to do the exact opposite, to turn people off, to be the topic of discussion in a negative way. How do you deal with, just personally, seeing how you do it for that love of the food and making people happy, when you get those unfortunate reviews or comments, or just people out there who might not be as satisfied with their experience? Just how do you reconcile those experiences?
Yeah, so I know full well that like everybody's got different flavor palettes. Like you can, no matter how good you cook, you can't please everybody. So I automatically know from the top, everybody's not gonna like my food, and that's okay. Like it doesn't hurt my feelings if somebody eats it and says they don't like it. It doesn't hurt my feelings at all. And so I try to, just because for every one person who doesn't like it, there's gonna be 100 more that do like it. And so that's kind of the mindset I try to have. Now, where I sometimes have to get a little petty in my responses to people when I leave bad reviews, because sometimes people just like, it's one thing to say you don't like the food, but sometimes people just like to go overboard with like how they describe it or whatever. And like, some people will leave a bad review because our ribs aren't fall off the bone, and they're like, ribs are supposed to be fall off the bone. Like they're not supposed to be. That's a preference.
Yeah.
And so, I don't get too upset about it, but sometimes I do get a little petty with people in their responses, because sometimes you just gotta let people know.
Yeah. No, I mean, because I mean, look, that's just, it's unfortunate. I think like restaurant industry is a tough industry a lot for this reason, because people, for some reason, when you pay for food, your expectations for like what you're getting for your dollar goes through the roof, versus if you're paying for a different service, right? Like you
Yeah.
pull up to a fast food restaurant and be like, these ain't hot enough. I want hot fries. It's like you at Bojangles, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, part of it, I think, is just I don't know why people have such high expectations when it comes to food versus maybe some other things, but it is one of those things where you're more likely to leave a bad review than a good review if you're at a restaurant. If you have a good to decent experience or great experience, you're more likely to walk out saying, yeah, that's good, I'll be back, but not say anything online. But if you just wait a little too long, something get on your nerves, not only are you leaving agitated, you're on your phone on the way out talking about and it can be it's just like, I ain't never going back there. But it's like, you've gotten bad service at McDonald's, or you've had an experience at McDonald's, you've been to another one, you've gone shopping somewhere, maybe didn't have a good experience, but you've been back to that same store. But I feel like for small business owners, they often get lumped into this sort of like harsh critics overall, where the margin for error is very slim. Would you disagree with that, or do you agree?
No, that's 100% spot on. I think part of it is just like this is the way our society is right now, right? Like everybody wants to like tell everybody about their bad experiences, and so people just they hop online quickly to leave those bad reviews. And I also think people have a level of entitlement and disrespect for small business owners, right? Like they think that because we're small businesses and we're more accessible than like the corporate places they go to, they can just say anything to us. And like they, in some ways, that like they're entitled to like help us be better, even if they have no idea what they're talking about, right? Like I'll have people come in and try to tell me like, oh yeah, I make brisket too. This is how I do it. And I'd be like, how many briskets do you make a day? And like, oh no, man, I do like 1 or 2 a month. I'd be like, okay,
yeah,
talk to me when you're doing 60 briskets a week, right? Like it's a whole different ball game when you're doing that, right? Or people have their opinions about what you should have on your menu, and if you don't have what they like, if what they want is not on your menu, they get upset. And I'd be like, well, if you want this on your menu, open a restaurant and put it on your menu, right? This is like my reflection of me, and I'm going to serve what I want to serve at my restaurant, right? And so people do talk to us any kind of way. People get mad. People have left public comments, but have sent me messages where they're like upset that I walked by their table, didn't stop and have a conversation with them. And I'm like, you could be eating at any other restaurant, and because like the owner's face isn't on the wall or named after them, you don't know who they are, and they walk past you all the time, and you don't get upset and send the messages saying, how could you walk past my table and not speak to me? But like for us, they feel like if I don't speak to them, it's like this great problem.
The gift and the curse. You the mascot too. You also got to come out there and be Chuck E. Cheese and get your tail pulled on and get like, get treated like the mascot sometimes.
Yeah. And then I'll take it one step further in terms of like the bad reviews. I feel like, and it's not just Black folk, but it's a lot. This is a lot, speaking of Black folk, where when Black-owned restaurants start to get recognition and publicity, like we have this thing where we have to go and leave a bad review to prove that they don't get what they don't deserve what they're getting the attention for, right? And so like we started to get a wave of bad reviews right after Eater Carolina's named us the best new barbecue restaurant in North Carolina for 2023. We started getting people coming in and leaving these reviews like, oh, it was overrated, oh, it's too hyped. And that's just because they don't like to see that this place is getting attention, right? And so they have to go and leave the review about why they don't think it's as good as people say it is, right? And then when we won the WRAL Voters' Choice for Best New Restaurant in the Triangle, right? We got a lot of great reviews, but we also had people come in and just trying to prove that we didn't deserve what we got recognized for, right? So you have that too, and I tell my customers and I tell my staff to not stress too much about it, because for all the people who do that, there's even more people that love us, and so to not get too caught up in that. But just like I don't know why it's like this in society, but we feel like we have to bring people down for no reason.
Yeah, and it's and when you're in the food industry, it's like that one in particular is going to be one of those industries where you just automatically open yourself up to such harsh criticism. Like it's literally like I just had somebody else on, we were talking about the restaurant industry. It's like the only industry in the world where you just you eat half of your meal and be like, I don't like it, and expect to get all of your money back. It's like it's even the fact that you ordered it and didn't like it. You know what I mean? It's just like I have a lot of just respect for restaurant owners, people who are willing to go into that industry and do it with a certain level of just like authenticity. You show up, you don't just open up the business, but you do publicize, you make yourself available, you put your face on it, you let people know, hey, it's me, this is what we're doing. And I applaud. It's dope hearing that you landed in East Durham and invested your business in East Durham, as a result of your experience of just how you showed up in Durham in the first place. I think that's pretty dope. But just the fact that you've taken something that was a passion, and then the impact of the family and that really sort of being a thing that you use to honor your son. Like, man, I think all that is just super fire, man. I had no clue that was really the story of Mike D and how it came to be to having a barbecue pit, man. Like, I have a couple more questions here before we officially close out. I guess my question is just, from your perspective, what is just the most difficult piece of owning a restaurant?
The most difficult piece is really the financial part of it, right? Like food costs. Like you were talking about food costs earlier. It's not even a couple of years. Like in December, we were paying $70 a case for wings. Right now, I'm paying $97 a case for wings.
Ooh,
right? Like,
let's just do some quick math for the listeners, because you're talking $70. 10% is $7. 20% would be $14. 30% would be $21. And you're saying that the price went from 70 to 90 what?
97. So we're up $27.
Ooh, so almost 40% increase. 30. That's almost a 40% increase. That's almost a 40% increase on the margin of wings.
Yeah, in just a 3-month span. And so people don't understand, like, the cost, that everything costs more for us. Our food costs go up, your payroll goes up, because you got to pay people a respectable wage. If you want to get people to do good work,
right,
and like coming to work, you got to pay them,
Right.
right? You can't pay them these low wages and expect to work them super hard and get good quality work, right? So you got to pay people a respectable wage. Your food costs are high. Your insurance costs are high. You still got rent. You still got all these other costs. So all that gets factored into like your pricing. And so people complain about your pricing, but they don't understand why your prices are the way they are, right? Like they don't understand how much everything is costing. They don't understand I'm there 17 hours a day cooking, right?
Yeah.
Like,
You go from not being a morning person to what time do you have to get there to get things going to really, because you talk about smoking these meats, pause. Like, what time do you start on a normal work day?
Yes, I'm normally up 4:30 in the morning. I'm usually to the restaurant cooking by 6:30, 7 o'clock at the latest. Sometimes a little bit later if I have to make like a store run or something, but I'm usually there starting between 6:30 and 7, and I don't leave until 10:30 at night.
Mm.
And so like people like time is money. And so people like you can't expect somebody to cook a brisket for 14 hours and think it's going to be cheap, right? Like it's already an expensive cut of meat, plus the time it takes to cook it, plus the cost of the fuel it takes to cook it, because I'm not using gas, right? I'm using wood. Wood costs,
Mm.
right? And so people have this idea that barbecue is supposed to be cheap. And so like just the financial part of a restaurant is probably the hardest thing. Just like managing all of that, from people complaining about your pricing to the cost of food to the cost of like my wood cost went up this year. And we buy our wood from a local person. So I'm happy to spend that because I'm keeping those dollars local. But like our cost of our drinks went up, right? We have a local guy in East Durham who makes most of our drinks for us, but his bottle cost went up. So I mean, she's got to charge us more,
Right.
right? So there's all these hidden costs that people don't understand because they don't own a restaurant. And so like that financial piece of a restaurant is really the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think that's why it's arguably one of the, if not the toughest, one of the toughest industries to run a business. Like, do you do catering as well to try and help generate the margins you need, or is it strictly just food that you sell over the counter? And yeah, that, because I have another question about like DoorDash and stuff like that before we get out of here. But in terms of just like trying to get, the margins for it to make sense, do you do catering as well, or is it just strictly what you do between those hours?
No, we do a lot of catering. Yeah, you got to do catering. Catering is where you make your margins. Catering is where you make your money.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do caterings to make it all work. So we do the normal service and we do caterings.
Word. What do you personally think about the DoorDashes, the Uber Eats? I don't know if Postmates is still out there, but what do you think about these services as a small business owner yourself? Because I don't really see you on there.
Because I don't use them because I don't believe in them.
Okay, so tell me why.
We already have small margins, and then they take another 30%, right? So like these places charge you for using their service, right? So like your restaurants, most of our margins on food costs are about 30% anyway. And so if you're going to take 30% of my 30%, so for your person just come pick up food and take it away, like it's not worth that cost to us. And so we don't take phone orders and we don't do delivery services. If you want food, you got to come and get it. Because it just like we don't have the staff capacity to have somebody who's just waiting for online orders to come in to do that. We may add an online component here soon, but you still have to come pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not like these delivery services. Just like they suck money from restaurants, and they market them as if they market themselves as if they are restaurants. Like all you do is have a driver come pick up food and deliver it. Like we still do all the work, and then you cut into our already small margins. So that's why I don't use those services.
Have you ever tried it since owning a restaurant?
I have not. I mean, I've talked to a lot of my restaurant friends who complained to me about the costs of doing it, and so we decided just not to do it.
So let me ask this: do you know? Maybe you don't know the answer, but like, let's say I order DoorDash, Uber Eats delivers it, and something's not what I ordered. Side ain't right. Something ain't matching up with the receipt. Who pays that price when you complain to the Uber Eats or the DoorDash person? Because you don't complain to the restaurant, you complain to Uber, DoorDash. Like, who eats that cost when you have those incidents?
Yeah, actually, I don't know. I've never asked any of my friends who use those services that question. I imagine that on some level that cost is coming from the restaurant, right? Like DoorDash and these services aren't gonna like it's not their food, so like they're not gonna. I'm sure they're not gonna take the hit on it. So I'm sure that there's in some way they pass those costs along. That's also one of the reasons why I don't do it. Right, is because if a delivery takes 30 minutes to get to you and you get cold food and then you complain about your food being cold and like people I've seen people go and leave bad reviews for getting their DoorDash food delivered cold and
Yeah,
they blame the restaurant for it. And it's like it's not our fault that it took that long to get to you. If you wanted hot food, you should have came and got it.
right.
Uh, and so that's one of the reasons that we don't do it, right? Because it's another avenue for people to come at you for something that's not even your fault, your responsibility. So between that and I'm sure that there's more costs that they pass along, those are just the reasons why we don't do those services.
Word. Yeah, man. I ain't gonna lie. Like from a small business perspective, hearing you say what you say there, like I get it because unless you're one of these franchises that's national brand reputation, those little things add up very quickly for a small business. And you saying they take 30% of the order, and that's already you're playing with slim margins. So depending on what the person orders, you could be at a loss depending on what they order and get delivered. Because everything don't have the same margin on the menu. So you mess around and get the thing that's got the lowest margin that you didn't, and then all of a sudden you paying 30%, you only was making 20% like that. Yeah, I feel what you mean. That can get crazy. But I do appreciate you sharing that because you talk about supporting local businesses, but in doing supporting local businesses, it's a cost to that ultimately it's just what it is. You know what I mean? It's no getting around it. Like what I appreciate about as someone having this opportunity to have this conversation with you, like I remember in the COVID times before the restaurant opened, I think was where I started following you on social media. And I think it was because of the sauces, if I remember correctly, because the restaurant was not open, but you were about to open up. And maybe it was a TV show appearance, but I had saw something to say, because I'm a foodie myself. There ain't many spots in Durham that I have not been to. Like, not many. And so I like what you do. So like if I'm gonna shout out somebody on this side of town, Lawrence Barbecue is typically a go-to for me personally because it's right down the road, very quick. Um when we talk about being downtown and being on the east side of Durham, I try to stop by there if that's something that I like. If I'm hungry and I'm like, you know what? Let me see if Mike D's is open. Now I ain't gonna talk about some of these restaurants. I don't know why more restaurants not open on Sundays. Shout out to you for being open on Sunday. More restaurant. It's something about Sunday and Monday. I know that people need off days too, but it seemed like the day I really want the food be the day that the restaurants are off the most. I have to just say that as somebody talking to a restaurant owner, like Sundays and Mondays, I feel like are the lowest days, but those be the days where I'd be like, only but so many people are open.
Yeah, no, Mondays is definitely a dead zone, right? Like, I mean, I know I'm closed on Mondays, and we try to have like once a month staff dinners. And whenever we're trying to organize these staff dinners at other restaurants, I'm like, man, everybody's closed
Closed
on
on
Monday.
Mondays. Yeah. You got to go to
So
one of those, chain joints, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they remind me, like, Mike, we closed on Mondays too for a reason.
Yeah. Facts. Yeah, but like I respect entrepreneurs. It started with a sauce and it has continued to grow. Like who knows what it will continue to grow into, but I think you've got a solid brand in the community. And I like that you intentionally chose East Durham. Like you could see it, but like even as things were changing, you were like, no, this area deserves it too. You've doubled down, not just the retail area, but then said, I want the restaurant over here too, even though getting robbed and whatnot. You said, give me the restaurant too. So it's like I respect that commitment to like bringing something to that part of town that otherwise, if you weren't there, it doesn't exist, man. So I think that's super fire.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, we try to do as much as we can to like circulate dollars in East Durham, right? So like I said, my wood source is from a business that's in East Durham. probably 85% of our employees live within 5 miles of the restaurant, so they're in East Durham. Like our best selling drinks, which are sweet teas, lemonades, and fruit
Fruit
punches, come
punch.
from Tony Cates, who is right there at the corner of Driver and Andrea selling hot dogs. He also makes his own teas and lemonades that we sell. So we try as much as possible to keep our dollars circulating in East Durham because that's our community and we want to bring people there. That's why we partner with festivals in East Durham. Like we want to bring people to East Durham. And keep our dollars circulating there because the more dollars we circulate in our community, the better it is for everybody. And so that's all we try to do with our restaurant, right? We want to build a community. We want to build a community in East Durham. We want to make people who aren't in East Durham to come to East Durham and build a community with those who are in East Durham.
Facts. And you actually are like, because another place that I had saw you randomly because I do follow Saltbox, Chef Ricky out there. I've been following, and y'all had the Durham Nick joint last summer? Y'all had the little picnic boxes. Well, let me not say picnic, but y'all had the little boxes with the food. It was like, I think Nzinga's, the chef from Nzinga's was in it too, but it was you, Chef Ricky, Zinga. Like you're not just like in Durham, like you're actually collaborating. Like, can you just talk a little bit about just that reality of having your own thing in Durham, but also being able to collaborate with other folks in Durham who do similar things?
Yeah, it's important for us to collaborate, right? The more we work together, the more money we can all make, right? Like people get caught up in the competition of stuff. And yeah, like we're competitors because we want people to come eat at our different places. But at the same time, if we work together, like it benefits all of us. And so, Chef Ricky is a friend and a mentor to me. He's given me some of the best advice from anybody when it comes to opening a restaurant. And so it's always great to be able to like partner with him to do things and partner with other places, right? We've got a lot of partnership things that work with other places coming up that we'll be announcing soon. And so I think this is part of it, right? Is doing things to like grow your business, but also like creating these partnerships because if small businesses don't stick together, then like, nobody else is going to stick together for us, right? So like, we got to stick together to support each other and lift each other up. And I think that's just the best way to do it. And that's another reason why I love East Durham, because East Durham, I think at this moment has the highest concentration of Black-owned businesses of any other place in Durham. And we all like lift each other up and support each other. Like we have like a really tight-knit business community over there. Not just the Black-owned businesses either, like the majority of the business over there, we have like a tight-knit community where you support and lift each other. And I think that is part of why we do these kind of partnerships with other places, right? It's because they just want to build together.
Word. Look, I got an idea for a sauce. Look, I don't know if it's gonna be a G Mike D's collaboration, but if you don't got it, I'm not gonna say it live here. I'm gonna wait till we in the recording and I'm gonna pitch it to you. But I got an idea for a sauce. Like if we could collaborate, I think it'd be super fire. But aside from that, any just not last words, but any takeaways that you hope people listening to this episode, whether they're watching, listening, is there anything that you hope that the viewers or listeners are able to take away after hearing from you today?
Yeah, I think the thing I want folks to take away from is like one, support local businesses, right? So like small local businesses are sort of the backbones of our community, so support them. And also for folks to just understand that like there's a lot of things that small business owners and entrepreneurs go through that you don't see because people don't put all that stuff on social media, right? People put the good stuff out, but you don't see all the struggles that people are going through. So just keep that in mind when you're dining out at these places. Keep that in mind when you're interacting with the staff at these places. That there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that you don't know that sort of impacts everything that you experience when you go into a place. And I want folks to keep that in mind.
Word up. Man, if you in Durham, make sure they open on Sundays. The only day you won't be able to catch them is on Mondays. But if you in Durham, make sure y'all go holler at Mike D. He's got a great menu. I don't know what these motherfuckers talking about, man. They got brisket, they got chicken, they got ribs, they got sides, they got the local drinks. And look, my personal favorite is the ribs with that sauce. I'm telling you, you can squeeze as much sauce, as many takeaways until he takes it away. I'm telling you, take advantage of the takeaway containers while you can. I already know people is taking advantage of the fact that you can just put as much sauce to those things as possible. Am I lying or not?
You're not lying. People walking away with like stacks of containers. Sometimes people be like, "Can I get an extra side container?" And they will fill up a whole side container with sauce.
Yo, the sauce is delicious, man. Make sure y'all check out Mike D. Shout out to you, man, for not just having the business, having it in the heart of East Durham, but man, shout out to you for doing this podcast. This is the G podcast where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. This is the G pod. Shout out Mike D. Man, make sure y'all go get some of them ribs and that brisket. If y'all got them bad reviews, shut the up and go home. Nobody want to hear that.
But it sounds like you made it just fine. I'm not taking no talk back. You see me blink yet?